than HSIP.
Any other comments or corrections?
This is Barbara. Move the minutes.
I think Barbara Salvatore just said she is.
I
saying-
moved the amended minutes.
Okay.
I second.
That's Andrew Haddock.
Oh, okay.
All right, we'll do roll call and meeting minutes then. Are you ready? I'll start. Bill Herman, Auburn.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Bill. Bill DeShotgo, Bedford.
You're muted, Bill.
Aaron, yes.
Thanks, Bill. Charlie Fairman, Bedford.
I'm here and yes.
Barbara Salvatore, Bedford.
Here and yes.
Dick Snow, Candia.
Here and yes.
Chester, we have Andrew Haddock
Here and yes.
and Deb Munson.
Here and yes.
Deerfield, Fred McGarry.
Here and abstain.
Okay, thanks, Fred. Derry, we have Jeff Moulton
Here and yes.
and John O'Connor.
Here and yes.
Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart
Here and yes.
and Jennifer Vadney. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, I'm here and I'll abstain.
Thank you, Jennifer. Goffstown, we have David Pierce.
Here, yes.
Thanks, David. And Hooksett, we have Cutler Brown. Cutler.
Here and abstain.
Right, you're abstain. Okay. Did I see Dick Marshall from Hooksett? Or
I
no?
didn't.
No, okay. Londonderry, Brian Battaglia,
Here and yes.
Deb Levens,
Here and yes.
Art Rugg,
Here and yes.
and Martin Trugus. I'm pretty sure we saw Martin.
Here and yes. Sorry.
Thank you. From Manchester, we have Peter Capano,
Here and yes.
Ray Clement,
Here, yes.
and Dan O'Neill.
Here, yes.
Thanks, Dan. New Boston, we have Mark Sunan,
Here and yes.
and in Ware, Tom Clow,
Here, yes.
and Peter Griffin isn't here today. So that's would have been Wyndham, but we have from DOT, William Rose.
Here and yes.
And I think that's it. Did I miss anyone of voting members?
Yes, Sylvia, Bill Jean, Bedford.
Oh, so sorry, Bill Jean Bedford. Thank you.
No worries. Here and yes.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else?
Mike Witten, MTA, here and yes.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's 2. Man, I'm down to a B-. Okay, anyone else I missed? No, great. And just to acknowledge also MPO, but non-voting, we have Tim White in the room. Let's see. All right, and many guests and staff. So thanks everyone for coming. Take it away, Jeff.
All right, any old business, Sylvia, before we move into the agenda?
I'm looking at Linda. Any old business? No.
All right, then we'll move into the first item under new business is the fiscal year 2021, 2024 Transportation Improvement Program. All yours, Nate.
All right. I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to share the screen properly. How's this? Can everybody see the slides here?
Very good.
All right, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Yes, this is, I think, will be a pretty brief item on the agenda, but we need to close the loop on action on our draft 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program, what we call our TIP. I showed this slide probably in every meeting, but I think it's important everybody recognizes how these different processes work together. So we have our long-range plan, which we call our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, that looks out to the 2045 horizon. We tackled that at the last meeting. And then we go into the 10-year plan. That's kind of when projects take their first step towards being formally funded. That's a state requirement in New Hampshire. And we'll be talking about the 10-year plan a little bit later in this agenda today. And then the TIP is really the first 4 years, those projects that are closest to construction and headed towards construction. It's the first 4 years essentially of the 10-year plan, and that's a federal requirement. So that's kind of how we go from concept to construction in this state. So right now we're focused, we'll be talking about the 10-year plan a little bit later, but right now we're talking about the TIP, kind of that next 4 years. So as you know, we've been coordinating with New Hampshire DOT as well as our partner MPOs around the state on an update to our TIP covering fiscal year 21 to 24. That was included in your packets, and we walked through in detail all of the project changes last month. We released our draft TIP for public review and comment on January 22nd. So we put it out for a 30-day comment period. That 30-day comment period ended yesterday, February 22nd. We had kind of two items of note that came out of the comment period. Our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT have updated their fiscal constraint analysis. That's actually included as an appendix in our TIP. So we would want to include the updated fiscal constraint analysis in that appendix as well. And we received a comment from New Hampshire DES on our air quality conformity discussion in the TIP, and DES clarified that that there are actually no transportation control measures in section 4.4. We had referenced a vehicle inspection program, I think as part of the state implementation plan. New Hampshire DES has clarified that there are no qualifying transportation control measures. So we're going to edit that accordingly in the final document. We did, again, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any about the different project changes in the TIP. We walked through those kind of one by one at the last meeting. I don't intend to do that again unless there are any particular questions about individual projects. Last week, our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, did unanimously recommend the adoption of our draft TIP. So at this point, this is our formal public hearing to consider adoption. We would welcome any questions or comments from members of the MPO or any interested members of the public at this time. And if there are none, we would welcome a motion to adopt the TIP.
Nate, quick question.
Yes.
On the John O'Connor Dairy, on the draft, which is figure 5, page 7, statewide program, update signing on the state highway system. Is that converting the exit signs from the current number to mileage?
No, I think it's updating just regular updates of antiquated or old signage. To my knowledge, none of the exit numbering stuff is moving forward at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the FY 2021-2024 TIP.
Second,
Yes. Who was the second?
Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.
Roll call.
Want to call the roll?
Yeah. Are you want to? You can do it.
Yeah.
Are you nervous?
No, I would just, so the folks that are highlighted here are the, okay, all right. The B team will call the roll today. Auburn, Bill Herman.
Yes.
Bedford, Bill DeShotko.
Yes.
Bedford, Charlie Fairman.
Yes.
Bill Jean.
Yes.
Barbara Salvatore.
Yes.
Candia, Dick Snow.
Aye.
Chester, Andrew Haddock.
Aye.
Deb Munson.
Yes.
Deerfield, Fred McGarry.
Yes.
Derry, Jeff Moulton.
Yes.
John O'Connor.
Yes.
Francistown, Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Jennifer Vadney.
Yes.
Goffstown, David Pierce.
Yes.
Hooksett, Cutler Brown.
Yes.
Londonderry, Brian Battaglia.
Yes.
Deb Levens. Deb Levens. Art Rugg.
Yes.
Marty Kruvis.
Yes.
Manchester, Peter Capano.
Yes.
Ray Clement.
Yes.
Dan O'Neill.
Yes.
New Boston, Mark Sunan.
Yes.
Ware, Tom Clow.
Yes.
New Hampshire DOT, William Rose.
Sorry,
William
yes.
Rose. Yep.
You might want to stop sharing and then you can see.
Oh, I'm okay. Yeah. I'll stop sharing now. Good call. Manchester Transit Authority, Mike Whitten.
Yes.
I think that's it.
Did Deb Levens leave or?
Did you get me? I thought I said yes.
We didn't hear.
We didn't
anything.
hear.
I hit the wrong button, sorry.
Okay, no worries. So Deb, for the record, Deb Levens is a yes. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
All right, thank you, Nate. So next item is the 2021 safety performance target. Carl?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is a little bit unorthodox. I've got a quick presentation that I'm going to do with Zach here. And so Sylvia and Zach are queuing up the, right? Sylvia will run it from there.
Yeah, that's fine.
So just to give you a brief intro to this. So here we go. This is quick. We do this now every year. We bear with me, my dog's trying to get in. We have these safety performance measures. There's a number of performance measures, and we all set?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just need you or Zach to cue for me. Thanks, Zach. You can go to the next slide. Basically, these are safety performance measures. There's 5 of them that we track on an annual basis. And as soon as we get into them, you'll recall what this is. And they're directional, meaning improve. Generally, there's some aspect of change over time. And this comes out of federal legislation, as I've got outlined here. It's about transparency and accountability, and to ensure that states distribute funds to transportation projects that collectively make progress towards the achievement of national goals. So this is about setting objectives, targets, and working to achieve them. And DOT and the MPOs track this, and we can either adopt our own targets or partner and just support the states. Next slide, please, Zach. So again, there's a bunch of these that came out of MAP 21, National Performance Goals, and we're just focused on the safety one today to achieve significant reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads. Next slide, please, Zach. Here are the 5 areas, and we're going to dive into these quite a bit, but again, number and rate of fatalities, number and rate of serious injuries, and lastly, number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. So we track these over 5 years, rolling averages, and we have some graphics to present to you that Zach is going to handle in a minute. Next slide, Zach. So our tasks today, again, states set these safety performance targets, and we have the flexibility to set our own, or we may support the state level performance targets. And last year and the year before, we've adopted the state of New Hampshire safety performance targets. And we'll get into the reason why, but that's what we're asking you to do again, to adopt and support, supporting the state's performance targets for 2021. Next slide. So here's where Zach takes over.
Morning, everyone. I'm going to quickly run through how we have been tracking over the last 10 years with these 5 different measures. So number 1 is the number of fatalities. If we look at the average, it's been up and down a little bit. But given year to year, over the last 10 years, it's been up. There's a very, very weak correlation for an upward trend, but you can see in a given year, it can shift by, by almost double in some cases from year to year. And we see that when it's reflected at the comparing our rate of change versus the state as well, you can see that we have a big jump there in 2015, 2016, because our fatalities, the absolute number is so much lower than the state. The relative change will be much higher or much more than the state overall, but you can see kind of bounces around. For us and for the state, it's up and down, over the last 10 years. Here's how we scored. These are the 5-year average for each year, moving average. And you can see that our target for 2019 and our target for 2020 and our 2021 proposed target, you can see we are falling short of that, but not by a whole lot. Next is the fatality rate. So this is the rate of fatalities. So the number of fatalities divided by 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And you can see we consistently have a significantly lower rate than the state for a number of different reasons, but that's been the case and that continues to be the case. And so if we look at our 5 years and then the last 2 years of where we projected to be, we are meeting our targets and would well meet the 2021 proposed target. The third measure is the number of serious injuries. We can all see the major decline there over the last 10 years. Part of that is due to changes in recording serious injuries by police departments and education on what is a serious injury and what is not. So it's hard to tweeze out how much of that is a real reduction in serious injuries and how much of that is just a difference in reporting. But we are seeing, year to year, a decent decline, and there's less volatility year to year based on the fact that we just have much, far more serious injuries than we do fatalities in the region. And that trend also mirrors that for the state. You can see the state is also going down over that 10-year period, while we have more volatility based again by our numbers are larger, or excuse me, our numbers are smaller than theirs. So here's the trend over time. You can see our 5 years and then the 2 previous targets and the proposed target for 2021. We were pretty close to meeting, let's see, our 2019. We're projected to meet our 2021 if trend holds. We see a similar effect with the serious injury rates. Once again, because they're since it's a ratio, they follow each other. Ours rate is slightly higher than the state, but not by much. And we can see, looking at that, we were also expected to meet our 2021 proposed target if we adopt the state's proposed targets. And lastly, looking at number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So you can see there's a big jump there. It looks like in 2016, 2017. But once again, this being a 5-year average and a relatively small number every year, you can see that jump actually happened back in 2013, and it's been riding in the wave essentially for the last couple of years. And in the near future, will once again fall out. But these are small numbers, so we can have a particularly bad year, a couple of bad accidents, and it's enough to throw off previous progress.
Zach, can you admit Brian Lord?
Oh, thank you. And once again, we look with the state, we somewhat mirror them, although we're up sometimes when they're down, and we're up when we're down when they're up. You can see that both us and the state were up over the last 10 years, but seems to be somewhat of a trend coming down. And if we look at the projected rate for 2021, we met our 2019 target, and we're on track to not exactly meet, but pretty close our 2021 target. So we'll see what happens. That's back to you, Carl.
All right, thanks, Zach. So here's some charts that just kind of give a comparison of the state 5-year rolling average, as we just discussed with Zach, for all 5 categories. And then the nice colorful column shows you the recent trends in each measure. and the desired direction. So we're moving in the right direction with all these. And as Zach mentioned, number of fatalities recently, there was an increase. And of course, we desire to push fatalities to zero, ideally. And here are the state targets, just knowing the history of the numbers that they've come up with. And the next slide, Zach. Here's, again, a different way to look at it. Our regional targets, looking at just what SNHPC, the MPO is looking to do, and our trend over time, 19, 20, 21, again, trying to push down that 18.3 to 18.2 is small, but that is a direction, that is showing the downward direction, and the rest correlate as well with a downward target. Next slide. Or is that it? Yeah. Okay. And just another way to see it again. So this shows the history, the recent and desired, the state target numerically, and then lastly, what we're recommending to you all to do, which is again, support the state target, our contribution to the state target, which each of these has, well, not everyone, but approximately 18 regionally for number of fatalities, number of serious injuries, we're down to 92, and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, approximately 12. We can always do better. This is not like if we hit that, then we're done. It's just it takes time to change these numbers, and these are realistic and somewhat aggressive considering past trends with a number of fatalities up recently. Next slide, Zach. Again, another summary table just for our region. Any questions at this point? I think, Zach, that's where we're at right at the end here.
Wouldn't you
Okay.
get some of the results from 2020 before you finalize the targets for this year?
I think DOT has set the targets already, so I'm not sure, Zach, how that correlates between what happened this past year and what we do for the next year. What the state does.
I'm trying to remember.
If we have the numbers from 2020.
Happens in the summer, I believe.
Yeah.
We typically see their report about June, I want to say.
So we'll see 2020s in June.
Oh, wow.
The results show. Is that what you mean, Zach?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark has said that state data is only available through 2019 in the chat. So that supports that too. So again,
Question.
Go ahead.
And I think I ask the same question every year regarding the fatality rate. The SNHPC region has been well under the state target since 2014, and yet we're supporting the state target. Why don't we go ahead and go for a lower number in that category?
I think historically, Peter, and this came up at TAC. Dick and Becky from Bedford both kind of asked the same question, and it is at your discretion, but we have to be a little bit careful, because if in the cases where we don't hit a target, then there's potential financial implications. I don't think in the short run, but maybe in the long run, you want to set targets that are achievable, but not. I know what you're saying. It looks like we could do it. I don't know how we would pick a number at this point. I'm not sure if Nate has any further guidance for this is how we've done it over the past few years. We're making progress on it, and we do make a big contribution to the state's target as having a lower number, but it's it is at your discretion to set a better or a more aggressive target, I guess, Peter.
I guess it wasn't clear.
But how is the question?
It wasn't clear, Carl, that there was any ramifications for not meeting the target. And maybe that's simply the answer.
As I've heard Nate say, and I'll reiterate, these are targets, and we have been beating them, and that's good. It's not something to be met. It's something to be exceeded for sure. But as long as we're meeting it, we're okay, and the flexibility with funding remains. exactly how some kind of a ding or repercussion for not achieving targets. I think that you need a little bit of a history of that, and it needs to probably be pretty bad and consistent over time. But it's a little, I'm not as familiar with exactly how penalties kick in either.
So there are no financial penalties for us not meeting regional targets. The penalty that could kick in is at the state level, and that penalty is that the state could lose the flexibility to flex their highway safety improvement program funding for other purposes that they may see fit. So in as much as you might consider that a penalty in losing some potentially losing some flexibility, that would not be our penalty though. That would be the state, the state. We do have this discussion regularly every time we revisit this. The state prepares. I think it's important to recognize that there's a lot that go into these numbers that we don't control. We have the ability to program a small, slice of transportation funding for certain safety improvement projects. And a lot of these numbers are driven by factors that extend well beyond infrastructure. There are lots of behavioral factors, seatbelt usage, impaired driving, speeding, lots of behavioral factors that play into these numbers. The state's targets are cooperatively developed with the New Hampshire DOT and the New Hampshire Department of Safety, the state targets are looking through that lens of both infrastructure and behavioral issues. So there's a lot of thought that goes into them, and each year we have supported those state targets. Is that to say that we could not select a different target for one or more of these? We certainly could, and it's at your discretion. Our recommendation for this year would be to continue to support the state targets. But it's certainly at the MPO's discretion if you wish to adopt a different target for any one of these measures. But as Carl said, we do have the guidance from our federal partners that we're supposed to be realistic and not aspirational, as they would put it, with how we set these targets. So
whatever the heck that means, right? Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've kind of on that same line. I mean, I get the idea of supporting something that's attainable, but we're at 18 and they're at 120. It just seems like at some point it's not even worth the exercise if the goal is so astronomically high compared to what we're seeing for real numbers. It's kind of like a layup. We're just going through the motion. I wonder what the implications would be if we halved the state's number for our region. That would still be more than triple where we're coming in now. If we had a goal of 60, saying, and we're still seeing something around 18, that seems like it would still have plenty of cushion for us, but it would also maybe start that momentum, at other regions and at the state level to try to improve on this instead of just, well, this is always what we've done, so we're just going to keep doing this and that goal's not going to change.
One thing to clarify on these goals for the rates, we actually do not, we don't set our own rates or targets for fatalities, serious injuries, non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. We adopt the state's targets. The numbers here just show us what our regional proportion of that proposed state target would be. So 18 would be our proportion of 120 fatalities for the state target. But we actually don't adopt 108. We don't adopt 18.2. We adopt 120.
Okay, so if we don't control anything at the regional level, I guess I'm a little confused about what this last 10 minutes of discussion has been.
Well, hang on, Mike, if I may.
Sorry, I'm lost. I'm with you, Peter.
Good question.
The 120 apportion to the SNHPC is 18.2. So really, and for number of fatalities, it's 18.2, and we're right there. So that makes sense. But the rate, which is you don't translate that at all. That's straight up. It was 0.715 and 14 through 18 and 0.69 2015 to 2019, and the target is 0.88. We're well below that. We have been for 6 years. That was my point. And it was rate, not the number of fatalities.
Okay, thank you for that.
But yeah, I like the layup. I like the layup metaphor. That's what I see there. Anyway, it's not much to spend a lot of time on.
Well, the point, I think, both you and you guys in the tech spend time on this every year. DOT is on the call here. I mean, they know that this is something that's that it's discussed and that this is important. I think maybe our homework is to figure out exactly how we can influence, more aggressive rates, numbers and direction, pushing here, because that's what you're really all after, is to do better.
You have to be really careful on any of the rate ones because the mileage calculation, the number of miles used in that is somebody's guess. I mean, they have no idea how many miles are driven in this region that go into that rate. So those numbers are frankly quite meaningless because they're I don't know how they figure out. They probably say, okay, there are X number of cars registered in this region, and those cars drive an average of so many miles. That's the way I assume they get it. They certainly don't know how many miles we each drive. So I suspect that this year, with the COVID, the number of actual miles driven in this region has dropped drastically. Nobody's commuting to Massachusetts, for instance. They're all working from home. So I just think that I think we basically ought to just ignore the rate ones. They don't, to me, have any meaning because they really don't have any knowledge of how many miles are really driven.
I don't want to hold this up. Would it be possible, Carl, to maybe slate this for a review, say mid-year, 6 months from now, so that we're not going through this again a year from now when the approval is needed? We kind of have to look at what can we change, what's really out of our control, and that doesn't hold up the approval you need today.
Yeah, I'm hearing a desire for a deeper dive on this and more understanding of what goes in, how these things are calculated, and what potentially we could really do as far as setting, because it is at our discretion as an MPO. So therefore, okay, if it's at our discretion, then how do we make some determination about there's a desire to go in this to do better? How do we actually go there? Yeah.
Linda Kuhnhart has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm all in favor of, you guys all want to dive deeper, and dive deeper sounds good to me, but what are you after? Because nothing is free. So if you're after something unattainable or marginally obtainable, at what cost are you willing to attain it? Seems to me we're doing pretty good. Seems to me like the group has done good for a long time. Seems to me that everybody wants nobody to die driving fast or stupidly, but I don't want to spend $1 billion to save one idiot from driving too fast on an icy highway. In the consideration of asking our group to investigate this deeper dive, what are you asking them to do exactly?
My understanding, Linda, is really just to get a little bit more understanding of what goes into setting these targets.
I would support that.
Okay. Did I get that right, Mike?
Yeah, exactly. Just a better idea of what is at our discretion and what really is out of our control. Just trying to get an idea where the numbers come from.
Yeah.
But not hold up the approval we need to do today.
I've heard you loud and clear, I think, and I'll discuss with the rest of the staff and get at this a little bit for you all.
I don't think we have any approval today, do we?
We do. We do need approval.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
to
I'm sorry,
adopt
you're
the
right.
state targets.
You're
So
right.
move to accept state targets. Linda Kuhnhart, Francistown.
And I'll second it. Peter.
Let's do the roll call.
Do I do? Just read through. Oh God, moving up in the world. Let's see. Auburn, and if for everyone's last name who I screw up, I'm sorry.
You can stop sharing too.
Oh, that's a good point.
You can see everyone.
Let's do that. Okay. Auburn, William Herman.
Yes.
Bedford, William DeShaco. Bedford, William DeShaco.
I can see he's on the phone.
And we'll come back to him. Charlie Fairman,
Aye.
Bill Jean,
Aye.
Barbara Salvatore,
Yes.
Candia Dick Snow,
Reluctantly, aye.
Chester Andrew Haddock,
Aye.
Deb Munson,
Yes.
Deerfield Frederick McGarry,
Yes.
Derry Jeff Moulton,
Yes.
John O'Connor,
Yes.
Francistown Linda Kuhnhart,
Yes.
Jennifer Vadney,
Yes.
Goffstown David Pierce,
Yes.
Hooksett Cutler Brown,
Yes.
Londonderry Brian Battaglia,
Yes.
Deborah Levin,
Yes.
Arthur Rugg,
Yes.
Martin Hugas,
Yes.
Manchester Peter Capano,
Yes.
Ray Clement,
Yes.
Dan O'Neill,
Yes.
New Boston Mark Sunan,
Yes.
Ware Tom Plow,
Yes.
for DOT William Rose,
Yes.
for MTA Mike Witten.
Yes.
Okay, that's all the voting members. Who is William DeShaco? Is he back on?
All right, we'll move on.
Okay, move on.
All right, thank. All right, Nate, you're back up for the fiscal year 2023, 2032 10-year plan update.
All right, I'm going to share my screen again. So there's quite a bit of content in this presentation, and looking at the time and recognizing that we do have a guest speaker next on the agenda. I'm going to try to go fairly quickly, but we're not making any decisions about this today. It's just an update. So as everyone knows, we've talked about this over the past few months, most recently in September, October, and November, that we are working with DOT and our colleagues around the state and other regional planning commissions to begin to develop the fiscal year 2023 to 2032 10-year plan. Our allocation, we talked about this a few months ago, our allocation for this 10-year plan cycle is the same as it was for the last cycle, $8.554 million. However, it's important, I think, that everybody recognize that this $8.554 million is not in today's dollars. It is expressed in year of expenditure dollars, and in our case, that generally means fiscal year 2031 and 2032 dollars, the final 2 years of the pending 10-year plan. So when you take out inflation of 2.55% per year, as well as the 10% New Hampshire DOT indirect costs that are included in most projects, that 8.554 million in today's dollars is a lot less than 8.554 million. It's a little bit less than 6 million in today's dollars, actually. Where have we been? Well, as you may recall, in the summer, we did a solicitation for 10-year plan projects. We sent correspondence to all of our communities, and we got 10-year plan submissions back in mid-September. We then assigned those projects for engineering review and an initial shortlisting by our TAC. And we sent a short list of candidate projects to DOT, as you might remember, back in November. And since that point, DOT has been reviewing those candidate projects. Our task under statute is to send those priorities, final regional priorities, to New Hampshire DOT by the end of March. So we've been working through this process. We're not making any final decisions today. We're gonna take this up again in March, but this is really an update to tell you what we've been learning about these projects. A reminder for the projects that are under consideration in this 10-year plan update, we have 7. The Bedford Route 3 widening project from Hawthorne Drive to Ray Wazorek Drive is an existing 10-year plan project that we know needs supplemental funding. We had a proposal from Deerfield to convert 107 Candia Road and Church Street to a roundabout. We had a proposal from Derry to expand the Derry Rail Trail from Madden Road to the Londonderry Town Line. There is an existing 10-year plan project to do improvements at the intersection of Route 28 and 128 in the town of Londonderry that is going to require supplemental funding. And then we had 3 project proposals from the city of Manchester. One to do an engineering study on the I-293 and 2nd Street corridors, one to do intersection improvements around the I-93 exit 8 interchange, kind of the Wellington Road area around exit 8, and one to do improvements at the intersections of Hooksett Road and Campbell Street and Hamill Drive in Manchester. You may recall back in the fall that we sent a short list of projects. We have a set of 10-year plan evaluation criteria. We worked with a subcommittee of our TAC that was comprised of Dick Snow, Linda Kuhnhart, and Lori Makaravich to do an initial work with us to do an initial review of the projects. The members of that subcommittee all represented communities that did not have active project proposals. You know, to ensure kind of that, you know, there were nobody with a potential conflict there on that subcommittee. What did the subcommittee come up with? Kind of a continuum of project priorities. So the highest priority and the one that really ranked very high was doing the engineering study of the I-293 and 2nd Street corridor in Manchester. And then immediately below that, adding supplemental funding to the 2 existing 10-year plan projects that we know to be underfunded. And then below that, the newly proposed projects in Derry, the rail trail, exit 8 in Manchester, the Campbell Street intersections in Manchester, and then Deerfield's roundabout project. We have entered, as we talked about back in the fall, we entered into a contract with VHB for on-call engineering, and they have assisted us with doing scoping and cost estimating work. We asked them to look at 5 of the 7 projects for scoping and cost estimating assistance. So we asked them to look at Deerfield, Derry, Londonderry, and 2 of the Manchester projects, Exit 8 and Campbell Street. We had an existing cost estimate from 2 years ago for the Bedford project, which still holds true. And we had some previous cost estimates that DOT had developed for at least the I-293 portion of that proposed engineering study in Manchester. So we're going in order of the priorities that were on the short list back in November, starting with the city of Manchester, the I-293 2nd Street engineering study. So when we were developing our long-range plan and doing the travel demand modeling at the regional level, one of the areas that really jumped out was I-293 between exit 5 and the Route 101 interchange being a bottleneck with capacity issues in the future. Exit 4, it links I-293 with 2nd Street and that corridor. So really I-293 and 2nd Street are inextricably linked in this area. And DOT had previously noted the need for an engineering study in this area to, quote, identify the next wave of turnpike needs to the F.E. Everett Turnpike in Manchester from 101 to exit 5. So there were kind of a lot of things coming together that pointing to the need for this particular engineering study. The hitch here is that this study would be a turnpike project. This is part of the turnpike system, this section of I-293. And our allocation of funding is federal funding. So when we talk about the $8.55 million of funding, that's federal funding. DOT has a general policy and practice that the turnpike system should be self-sustaining with turnpike funding. They try to avoid using federal funding on the turnpike system. So when we were talking with New Hampshire DOT and reviewing these projects, DOT has advised that this project is not going to be included in the 2023 to 2032 10-year plan. The turnpike funds are already fully subscribed. for projects like the exit 6 and 7 reconstruction, the Effie Everett Turnpike construction between Nashua and Bedford, I believe portions of the Bow Concord project. They have these big turnpike projects that they're trying to figure out how to get to the finish line in the next 10 years. And kind of all in the middle of this is the COVID pandemic. And COVID pandemic affecting travel volumes on the turnpike system and affecting the toll revenues for the turnpike system. And as the toll revenues for the turnpike system are affected, they have less funding to be able to implement projects in the turnpike program. So they're dealing with all of these constraints, and basically DOT's guidance was, now is probably not the right time for us to be pursuing this engineering study. And so our recommendation would be really kind of twofold. DOT has set aside funding in the last 10-year plan, and they're preparing a program that will be a statewide corridor study program. The second street component of this study could potentially be a good candidate for that corridor study program. And we expect that corridor study program, we're going to be hearing more details about it in the spring. So the second street component may be a good candidate for that pending program. And then the I-293 component, we could revisit with DOT in 2 years with the next 10-year plan update, when we have a better, when DOT has a better handle on the impact of COVID on the turnpike revenues and what their toll revenue picture is looking like in the future. The town of Bedford, this is the Route 3 project. It's a bottleneck area from Hawthorne Drive to Ray Wazorek Drive. This project was added back in 2015, leading up to the fiscal 2017-2026 10-year plan update. That was before my time with the commission, but it was recognized at that time that it was going to require supplemental funding to fully fund that project. We added supplemental funding in the last 10-year plan update cycle, and even at that time, recognized that additional supplemental funding would be needed to get this project to the finish line. The project is currently programmed for $13.27 million in year of expenditure dollars, with construction beginning in fiscal year 2026. The project is estimated to cost $16.4 million in today's dollars. So there's still underfunding there. What would the project do? This is a bottleneck system on bottleneck segment on Route 3. It's part of the national highway system. And so the typical section here would be 4 12-foot travel lanes with a 14-foot raised median, 5-foot shoulders on the outside and 2 feet along the median, 5-foot paved sidewalk on the east side of the road with a 7-foot grass panel on the west side. So it's a capacity expansion, but there's also some complete streets elements to this project. The town of Bedford continues to support the project. They've submitted correspondence requesting that supplemental funding be allocated to the project in this 10-year plan update. And DOT has also expressed their willingness to continue to work with us to bring the project to construction if we continue to make good faith efforts to fully fund the project. So our staff recommendation at this point is indeed to use a portion of our allocation to add supplemental funding to this project. Town of Londonderry. This is the intersection of Route 28 and 128. We've got an aerial photo and a street view photo. I'm sure most everybody on the call today is familiar with this project. We added this project as part of the fiscal 19 to 2028 10-year plan update back in 2017. The original project proposal was based on a realignment and signalization of the intersection proposed by Stantec about 10 years ago now. The project is currently programmed for $1.67 million in year of expenditure dollars, with construction scheduled for 2027. We did assign this project to our on-call engineering firm for a scope and cost estimate. And one of the reasons we did that is we realized that the original Stantec concept was probably not going to be feasible anymore. And VHB did indeed find that the Stantec concept is not feasible anymore because of some development that's occurred next to the intersection. So on this particular photo, there's a storage center that's, if you see where it's been actually overlaid on top of the Stantec concept, and you see it's right in the middle of that original concept. So Now, VHB set out to figure out how to achieve a realignment and signalization of the intersection by working around this, development that's occurred in the area. And that's what you see on this slide. I know that this is too small to read, but they did.
Mobile gas station. That was originally intended for an intersection, yeah.
Yep.
Now I'm screwed up on this.
Just tell us.
Well, the line,
Redoing the whole area.
Let's see.
They'll either make a smaller concept or.
Okay. So the VHB they were successfully able to develop a concept that worked around those constraints. That's what I'm showing on the screen here. There's kind of a reconfigured design. We reviewed this reconfigured design with the town of Londonderry. They continue to support the project and they support this reconfigured design for the intersection. So due to the constraints of the storage facility and that reconfigured design, the project is going to require supplemental funding. The estimated cost of the project is $5.6 million in today's dollars. So our initial staff recommendation, just like we talked about with the Bedford project, is to use a portion of the SNHPC's allocation to add supplemental funding to this project as well. In the town of Derry, this is a newly proposed project. It's an extension of the Derry Rail Trail to the Londonderry town line from the exit 4A area at Madden Road. It's 1,900 feet. This is, we've been talking about this project for a long time as part of the development of the Granite State Rail Trail effort. We did assign this project to our on-call engineering firm for scoping and cost estimating. Their cost estimate was $825,000, $115,000 for engineering, $710,000 for construction. DOT noted that the construction cost estimate appeared to be a bit conservative, but they didn't disagree with it necessarily. One of our recommendation is that this is a really good project, but it is a better fit for and could be constructed sooner through the Transportation Alternatives Program. There's a solicitation right now for Transportation Alternatives Program funding. I know that the town of Derry has already submitted a letter of intent to apply for this project. And so we will continue to provide any assistance to the town of Derry or any other applicants to the TAP program in this round. But that is likely a path to get this project done more quickly than going through the 10-year plan process. So we would encourage the town of Derry to continue to pursue TAP funding for the project. In the city of Manchester, the Exit 8 interchange improvements, that's the I-93 northbound and southbound ramps, as well as the intersection of Bridge Street and Mammoth Road, kind of as shown on this map. I'm going to move more quickly now because I'm running out of time. There have been some development proposals in the area that have triggered traffic impact analyses. These intersections are projected to exceed their volume to capacity ratio in the coming years. The city envisions a combination of operational improvements through adaptive signal control, as well as intersection capacity improvements and potentially bicycle and pedestrian improvements at the intersection. We assigned this to VHB for scoping and cost estimating, and VHB did develop a concept that considered adaptive signal control, intersection capacity improvements, and a bicycle lane through the area. They gave us kind of a menu for a cost estimate based on which elements of the project we wanted to pursue. VHB's cost estimate was $785,000 for the adaptive signal control improvements, a little over $3.1 million for intersection capacity improvements, and just about $3 million for the bicycle lane portion of it. And why is that so high? Well, there would be a lot of curb and utilities to kind of relocate. And when you start moving curb, it gets expensive pretty quickly. Our recommendation here is to pursue a CMAQ, congestion mitigation and air quality funding, in the next solicitation for the adaptive signal control component of the project. And then we could revisit this in the next 10-year plan round and potentially supplement that adaptive signal control project with funding to add future intersection capacity improvements. So kind of a phased project that would start with a CMAQ project to implement adaptive signal control at the intersection, as well as looking at what alternatives may exist to incorporate a bicycle lane. And that could include potentially lane width modifications. That was a suggestion from New Hampshire DOT, was to look at lane width modifications as a way of squeezing enough space out to get a bicycle lane in that area. Continuing in Manchester, these are two intersections on Campbell Street. The left one is the intersection of Hooksett Road and Campbell Street, and the right one would be the intersection of Campbell Street and Hamel Drive. You see these engineered images because engineering work had already been done a number of years ago by Hoyle Tanner and Associates to develop a preliminary design for this project. So we assigned our on-call engineer with the task of doing a peer review of those Hoyle Tanner plans and giving us a current cost estimate for what this project would cost based on those plans. Their cost estimate was just under $4.2 million. And the stormwater MS4 requirements were noted as a potential cost factor in the project. DOT has advised that if funded, this project would need to be locally managed by the city of Manchester, which would include a 20% cash match from the city. Staff recommendation here would be that at least the first intersection, Hooksett Road and Campbell Street, those improvements could potentially fit into the scope of a CMAQ project, which the city could consider in the next CMAQ solicitation. And then again, as a kind of a multi-step process that could ultimately be built upon and supplemented in the future with 10-year plan funding to add the Campbell Street Hamel Drive roundabout, possibly in the next round. So kind of two between Exit 8 and this Campbell Street project, there's two potential CMAQ projects of interest for the city. And we know that in the last CMAQ cycle 2 years ago, that indeed two projects were funded in the city of Manchester through the CMAQ program. So this is certainly not out of the realm of possibility that two projects could be funded through CMAQ to help advance each of these. In the town of Deerfield, the proposal was to convert the intersection of Route 107, Candia Road and Church Street to a roundabout. We did assign this project to VHB for scoping and cost estimating, and they did develop what you see on the screen here, which is a single lane, 4-leg roundabout concept at the intersection based on the town's vision for the project. VHB's cost estimate was just under 1.8 million. DOT in their analysis thought that the right-of-way estimate of 39,000 may be a bit low. Also, concerns have been raised about potential historic resource impacts for the project. And of note, there is a building dating back to 1875 at the corner of this intersection. So our recommendation would be to continue to work with VHB in the town to refine this concept, to fully quantify what the historic resource and right-of-way impacts would be, and then revisit the project in the next 10-year plan update cycle. So this is one where we've got to start, but we need to do a little bit more homework on it before we can fully answer some of the questions that have come up about it. So just kind of a summary of initial recommendations. And again, we're not making any final decisions today, but this is kind of where we think we're at this point. And we'll talk more about this next month in March. For the engineering study in Manchester, looking at pursuing corridor program funding for the 2nd Street component of that project, and then revisiting the I-293 component of it with DOT 2 years from now when they have a better handle on COVID impacts to the turnpike revenues. Focusing our regional allocation to add supplemental funding to our 2 existing 10-year plan projects that need supplemental funding, those being in Bedford and then the 128 intersection in Londonderry. Working with Derry to continue to pursue TAP funding as they already are in the process of for the rail trail expansion project. Working with the city of Manchester to pursue CMAQ funding as a first step to the Exit 8 and Campbell Street projects. and then working with VHB in the town of Deerfield to continue to evaluate historic resource impacts, and then reevaluate that project in the next 10-year plan update. That's it for now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are burning questions. Again, we're not making any decisions today, but I do know that it's 12:40 and we do need to move on to our guest speaker who has been waiting patiently.
Dan O'Neill.
Dan O'Neill.
Nate, I just want to be clear. The turnpike revenue is down because of COVID, but they also, several years ago, pre-COVID, the DOT requested an increase in tolls and was denied. So I guess my question is this really impacted by COVID, or is it just not enough money in the turnpike fund to do the Second Street project?
Yeah, I'd probably defer to DOT to answer that. One of the places, Dan, where we pulled that quote from about the needs in that section of the turnpike was from the white paper from the toll increase proposal. That was one of the projects that they said, if the toll increase proposal goes through, we're going to fund an engineering study on this section of the I-293 corridor. So, you know, that had been back in, I think, 2017 now. We've been watching that corridor study, and I know the city's been watching it. We want to try to advance that. We thought now, kind of 4 years later, or like, okay, let's broach the idea with DOT and see if they can't move forward. I think it's just it's definitely a revenue issue, Dan, and could that revenue issue be helped through a toll increase? I'm sure it could, but at the same time, I think DOT is recognizing, and I don't speak for them, but I think they're recognizing that with exit 6 and 7, the F.E. Everett Turnpike expansion from Bedford to Nashua and parts of the Bow Concord project, they have these 3 huge capital projects that they're trying not to slip in the 10-year plan. And so they're focusing their turnpike program revenues on trying to keep those projects moving to the finish line in this 10-year plan.
Thank you for that, and I apologize to my colleague Will Stewart for holding up his time before us.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone. Again, we're going to revisit the 10-year plan in March, and appreciate the question, Dan. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to maybe shoot me an email or give me a call anytime.
Thank you, Nate. Do we have a motion to adjourn the MPO?
Also move Barbara Salvatore.
I'll second.
That was Deb Munson. Let's do a thumbs up on that real quick. I see a lot of thumbs, so we're good to go. All right.
I will call to order the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And then the first action is meeting minutes of December 22nd, 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
That was Peter Capano.
I'll second it. Peter Griffin.
Peter Griffin is with us.
Any comments?
All right, we'll go through the roll call then.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Auburn, Bill Herman. Do we still have Bill?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Bedford, Bill DeShaco.
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Bill Jean,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Candia, Dick Snow.
Snow, aye.
Thank you. Chester, Andrew Haddock,
Aye.
Deb Munson,
Yes.
Deerfield, Fred,
Yes.
Derry, Jeff,
Yes.
John O'Connor,
Yes.
Francistown, Linda,
Yes.
Jennifer Vadney,
Yes.
Goffstown, David Pierce,
Yes.
Hooksett, Cutler,
Abstain.
abstain. Thank you. Londonderry, Bryan,
Yes.
Deb Levin.
Yes.
Thank you, Deb. Art,
Yes.
Martin. Martin Sruga.
Yes.
Thank you. Manchester, Peter.
Yes.
Ray. Ray Clement. Did we lose Ray?
He's up there.
He's up there. We don't hear Ray. All right. Dan O'Neill
Yes.
from New Boston, Mark Sunan,
Yes.
Ware Tom Clow,
Yes.
and Wyndham Peter Griffin.
Yes.
And I don't know if I got Brian Lord.
I'm here, yes.
Thank you, Brian.
Sorry I was late today.
Yeah, no problem. All right.
Very good.
Okay.
So we'll move on to our last item, the Stay Work Play New Hampshire with James and Will Stewart.
Yeah, thanks, Will Stewart, for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation to come and chat with you all today about why young people are staying in New Hampshire and why they are leaving and might be considering leaving. So have a brief presentation to share with you and be happy to, of course, answer any questions too, time permitting. I recognize that the meeting's been going on, so I don't want to keep anyone past lunch, certainly. So I guess without any further ado, if I have the ability to share my screen, we can go ahead and get started.
Go for it.
Okay.
I've made you co-host. You can take it away.
All right, everybody see? Excellent. So for those of you who might not be aware, Stay Work Play is a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to attract and retain more young people. And again, my name is Will Stewart, and I'm the executive director of this statewide nonprofit that was started about a dozen years ago. And why? Why do we need to attract and retain more young people? You might be aware that New Hampshire, we're a pretty old state. In fact, we're the second oldest state by average age in the country. Second only to Maine, which is the oldest country or oldest state in the country, and we're tied with Vermont, the second oldest state. So it's a Northern New England challenge that we face. Though here in New Hampshire, we do have a little bit more of a challenge in some ways than our neighboring states. One, we have a very low unemployment rate, which is on one hand very good. A lot of people who have who want jobs have them. However, it's a major challenge for our employers here in the state, being able to find the people they need to do the jobs they need. And also for our communities as well, and our nonprofits to be able to find the volunteers they need to serve on town boards or nonprofit committees. So that's a challenge, and kind of exacerbated by the fact that New Hampshire is #1 in the percentage of high school graduates that we export out of state to pursue bachelor's degrees. So young people who want to pursue a 4-year degree, 62%, nearly 2 out of 3 are leaving New Hampshire every year to do just that. So that's a challenge, kind of a perfect storm of why we really need a concerted focus on attracting and retaining more young people here. And all of this is really even further exacerbated for those young people who do stay here after high school. That, as you can see, we have the highest average student debt load in the country here in New Hampshire. And for those reasons, for those young people who do stay here and go to school, a lot of them are leaving after they graduate, feeling they need to go to metropolitan areas across the country where they might be able to make higher wages and really work to pay back that high student loan debt. So how do we go about this? I mean, these are pretty big challenges, not the least of which are big demographic trends. And at Stay Work Play, as I mentioned, we're a statewide nonprofit, but we're a small nonprofit, a full-time staff of 3 with a budget of about $200,000. So to say we're under-resourced for this major challenge that we're kind of that we're set to address, we recognize pretty quickly that we need facts if we want to have a prayer at moving the needle of attracting and retaining more young people. And to do that, we recognize that we need to figure out what young people want and what they don't want. And one of the things I think we hear about young people, and when people say young people, they also kind of use the term millennial. as a synonym for that, which is partially true. Millennials, FYI, the oldest millennials are about to hit 40. So we're also talking about Gen Z. But kind of what we hear about young people today is, oh, New Hampshire doesn't stand a prayer because all young people want is to live in a major city in a loft apartment and get everywhere by Uber and bike share. And these are all cool things. Don't get me wrong. I'm particularly fond of bikes and bike shares, but it's not accurate. I think we do have a tendency to say about generations that, oh, everybody in this generation is the same. But there are millennials and Gen Z who want to live in a rural lifestyle. Some want a suburban lifestyle, and yes, some do want this type of urban lifestyle. But just like the boomers and the greatest generation, can't be lumped in as all wanting one thing, so it is with millennials and Gen Z too. So we recognize that we need to figure out, well, what do they actually want? So we commissioned a survey a couple of years ago, looking to get data, because again, we have limited resources, and so we need good data if, again, we want to have a chance of moving the needle here. So we commissioned a polling firm out on the seacoast to survey 20 to 40-year-olds living here in New Hampshire about why they stay and why they might leave. And so I'll start with just a little bit of demographic information that we found out about this group. About half were born here in New Hampshire, half were born elsewhere. With regard to their living situations, 58%, a little bit more than half, live with a spouse or a partner. As you can see, we have, move here, 14% who live alone, 7% who live with friends or roommates, and then 21%, 1 out of 5, who live at home with their parents or with other family members. So that's significant. So we also found that those who do live at home, the majority of those are not paying rent. Speaking to a number of things, but really going back to that, in large part, that student debt load that a lot of young graduates and young people are carrying with them, in some cases for decades. They just can't afford the high rents here in New Hampshire, coupled with their student debt loads. So this is probably the most depressing thing I'm going to tell you today, and the most depressing thing we learned from our survey. We asked, how many friends do you have that live in an area that you would consider close or easily accessible to you? 21%, again, 1 out of 5, said they have 0 friends that they would consider close or easily accessible to them. Now, I mean, this shocked, I think, all of us when we saw this data. And I mean, it's sad, right? On an individual level, if somebody doesn't have a friend nearby, that's depressing and sad. It's very concerning also, though, on a workforce retention level. Because if somebody doesn't have friends, then their job's probably just a job. And of course, this was all, this data was collected pre-COVID, but if somebody doesn't have friends, they're not going out to grab a beer after work. They're not, taking a yoga class with friends on Saturday. They're not going for a hike or out to play a game with somebody. So their job's pretty much just a job. And if another one comes along that offers them more money, say, or takes them back to where their friends and family actually are, I think they're that much more likely to take it without friends. So this is another a little bit concerning slide. We asked, how likely is it that you consider moving out of New Hampshire within the next 2 years? Again, very short time frame here, 24 months. Only 19% said definitely not. About a third said probably not. That's okay. But then things start getting a little shaky. 22% say they're unsure. 16% say, yeah, I probably would move. And 14% say they definitely would. So like looking at this, if I'm a betting man, I'm looking at 1 out of 3 who in 2 years' time, they're gone, which again, very concerning, not just for our employers, but our towns as well. So why? Why are these young people considering leaving the state? Here we have kind of our top 3, and the biggest one being career and job opportunities. People just don't think that New Hampshire is a place where they can have a great job and a great career. A little bit surprising sometimes when we saw, and again pre-COVID, that we had something like 20,000 open jobs at any given time. But that's the perception that we're working against. There aren't any good jobs or career opportunities here. They also mentioned, again, no surprise, housing. Housing is super expensive and increasingly out of reach for young people who, again, are making lower wages. They're at the start of their careers. Again, have student loan debt. Public transportation is not great here, so they probably have a car payment too. And when rents keep going up, and certainly housing prices keep going up, it's a big concern. So places in the South and West just look all that much more attractive when you can get a lot more house for a lot fewer dollars. And then finally, kind of rounding out the top three, they said they would consider moving again so they could make friends, have people to hang out with. Kind of rounding out our top reasons why people leave, they said New Hampshire's lack of diversity is a reason that they would leave. They want to live in a more diverse and interesting place. They mentioned lack of public transportation as being a reason to potentially leave. They said childcare, affordability and availability is a challenge here in the state. And that's something we're hearing more and more about anecdotally as well. And then finally, they said a lack of nightlife and entertainment options, a reason that they would consider going elsewhere. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are reasons that people stay here as well. And basically, in short, it's everything the outdoors is why people stay here in New Hampshire. And this trend's not just with younger people, but older people, all of us. I think we appreciate everything that New Hampshire has to offer by way of outdoor recreation. And we heard that across this survey, everything from the outdoor recreational opportunities themselves, your hiking and skiing and boating and all of that, to the environment itself, to access to great parks, state, local, and otherwise, and national, that people can get out and enjoy. They also mentioned, kind of in a secondary position, great schools, both K-12 and higher ed here in the state. They mentioned great neighborhoods, tight-knit neighborhoods here in New Hampshire that kept them here, as well as the state's local and independent businesses, retail, restaurants, those types of things. They really do like those aspects of the state. So taking all of this, we kind of looked and said, well, what does Stay Work Play need to do, to address this situation? And we kind of launched a new strategic plan, as you can see, in kind of these four areas. And one, we kind of working to connect young people, again, being this biggest surprise, this loneliness factor of 1 out of 5 young people saying they didn't have a friend. So we're really working to do what we can to connect young people to each other, yes, but also to their communities, to nonprofits in their areas, and other such opportunities where people can really put down roots. I mean, that's our ultimate goal, to get people, putting down those roots here, so that when those opportunities do come along to leave the state, at least we get people thinking and, reflecting on, well, if I were to take this other job out of state, I would be leaving all of these friends I've made and all of this difference that I'm making, through these various volunteer opportunities and those types of things. We also have gotten into advocacy, nonpartisan issues-based advocacy, primarily in Concord, looking to get behind legislative proposals that will make New Hampshire more attractive to young people. So again, really based on what we learned in the survey, housing affordability is our biggest issue. This year, for example, we've taken positions on 13 bills, 7 of them, more than half, are related to housing. And again, other things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, as a policy priority of ours. Again, childcare, affordability. Also work bills looking to make it easier for young people to actually serve in office, both at the state and local levels. And then finally, kind of our bread and butter, has always been, kind of branding and promoting New Hampshire as a place of opportunity for young people. So kind of, we want to make sure that, young people in New Hampshire know of the opportunities that are here. Because that's another thing that we hear, both from high school students and college students and other young people, is that, there always seem to be surprised at the, kind of the quality of jobs that are here, the interesting employers, opportunities, for entertainment or arts and culture. I mean, the recreation and outdoor stuff they get, right? That's pretty obvious, but a lot of the things, like if you're into the outdoors, yeah, no problem. You know, New Hampshire's the place for you. But, what about if you're into community theater, for example, or slam poetry? I mean, we have those things here in this region, just as a small example. But if people don't know they exist, it's almost like, that's part of the challenge. They're going to go, someplace where they do think they exist. So we're working to promote these types of, opportunities, again, job, career, entertainment, and otherwise. And then, just work to promote, New Hampshire, and, kind of create that, and reinforce that brand as a place where young people can make a difference here in the state. Finally, I'll wrap up very briefly, just, showing, kind of shortly, some of the things that New Hampshire, or I should say Stay Work Play, is doing to attract and retain more young people based on everything that we've learned in this survey and through our other, anecdotal conversations that we have. You can see there kind of in the upper left-hand corner are 2 examples of our Insider's Guide series. And we have one here for the Greater Manchester region. And again, these are really documents, PDF guides that we put together to help employers and others here in the region to sell the Greater Manchester region. And we're putting these out for all regions of the state. So far, we have ones for Greater Concord, the Lakes region, and Greater Nashua. Again, to help employers sell the region. One of the things that we hear from employers is they say increasingly they're having to sell where they are, not just who they are and what they do, not just the actual positions they're trying to fill in the company, but they're saying, I was out in, Keene about a year ago, and they said, I was at a big employer out there, offers great wages, but they're having trouble filling positions because, young people and others will increasingly ask, okay, the job sounds great, but, what the heck do I do in Keene? So we're helping, companies to be able to answer those questions through these insiders guides. We also, on the publication end, have working to promote internships. There's data from UNH that shows that if a young person has an internship in New Hampshire, they are 12 times as likely to stay here 18 months post-graduation than a student that does not have an internship. So for that reason, we want to make it easier for companies to offer internships, to increase both the quantity and the quality of those opportunities for young people. Again, to get them connected, even if that internship doesn't turn into a job, internships are a great way to get people familiar with whatever field or industry they're interested in, the players they're in, here in the state, and also not for nothing, again, to make friends, amongst coworkers as well. I mentioned our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We have a new series based on that, again, working to make New Hampshire more friendly to populations of color, to the BIPOC population. And again, not just because it's the right thing to do, but again, because data show that young people want to live in a more diverse place. And New Hampshire, obviously we're a very white state. We have a lot of work to do to get there, but something that we certainly need to work on for many reasons, but again, one of which to attract and retain more young people. We have our Rising Stars Awards, kind of our signature annual event we use to highlight and promote what young people are doing, the differences they are making here in New Hampshire. Again, to show young people what's possible and what's possible here in New Hampshire. Because one of the things we like to work to frame the state as a place where young people can make a difference, and perhaps easier than they can do in larger, more populous urban areas or even larger states. And this is a great way to do that. Same thing for our New Hampshire Next Summit for Young Changemakers, which has quickly become kind of our second biggest event. Again, showcasing New Hampshire as a place where young people can make a difference, whether it's through public service or the arts or entrepreneurship, through the environment. Again, really being able to sing from the same hymnal over and over again. I mentioned our advocacy efforts. We have our State House Skinny email, which keeps folks involved of what's going on in Concord with regard to legislation that could affect the attraction and retention of young people. I'm there virtually these days as a registered lobbyist on behalf of Stay Work Play advocating. And we're also working to get young people in communities across the state to join up for our advocacy network to reach out to their own legislators who represent them on these types of bills. We're doing right now our Matters of State series across the state, bringing together younger, or I should say legislators with their younger constituents to hear firsthand what the issues are of young people and the really types of lived experiences that they're facing. that our older legislature, again, perhaps no surprise, we have the oldest average legislature in the country here in New Hampshire. So to be able to make those connections between young and older representatives. Finally, I'll end with our Boomerang Week. A lot of folks will ask, well, a lot of what Stay Work Play is focused on is retention of young people. And that's certainly true. It's certainly been our main focus. As the old adage goes, it's easier to keep an existing customer than to get a new one, right? But we recognize that while we are seeing numbers that are positive with regard to the attraction and retention, or I should say the attraction of young people. In fact, New Hampshire is the only state in the Northeast that is seeing a net in-migration of young people. It's modest, but we are seeing it here in the state, one of only 10 states nationwide. But we recognize that we're not going to be able to fill all the roles we need naturally. We need to attract more people from outside. And that's what New Hampshire was really, how we kind of survived and grew as a powerhouse in recent decades, when people would move up, from Massachusetts, Connecticut, and point south. But that spigot turned off like 20 years ago. We're not seeing that massive in-migration that fueled our growth for so long. And so we need more of a focus to attract people from the outside. And we're beginning to do that at Stay Work Play, modestly, again, given our limited resources. But one of the things we've started to do every the week of Thanksgiving is what we call Boomerang Week. And a boomerang in our parlance is somebody who is from New Hampshire, leaves for school or jobs or other reasons, but who might boomerang back here one day. And so we use the week of Thanksgiving to market to these people, because the week of Thanksgiving is traditionally when more people come back than at any other time of the year, to visit with family. So I know I've been talking a mile a minute here. I'm very cognizant of time. I know everybody's probably looking forward to getting ready for lunch. So I will stop there, and happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Well, for that 30% or so of people that were interested in leaving the state, do we know how that compares to other states in New England or the country? And if, maybe there's a certain percentage of them that no matter what we do, they want warmer weather or a large urban environment. No matter what we do, they're gonna leave. But
right. So, we do not have data on, what other states are doing or what those percentages are for other states. And, I will grant, yes, I think that, there are certain things that people are always, if people hate the cold, then yeah, New Hampshire is probably not the place they want to hang out. The question is, being able to attract and retain, those who value what New Hampshire does have to offer. And so, being able to double down on, our positives, why people stay, and not trying to be everything to everybody. I think that's a losing proposition and a waste of time and money. But really focusing on, I know we work pretty closely with Taylor Caswell and his crew at the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs, and really focus on, for example, on kind of the outdoor recreational industry, not just promoting it, but really being able to promote that and the opportunities, for work-life balance, for those who are very much interested in those things. One of the things we're talking about is doing a kind of a geo-targeted campaign, kind of after COVID's over, and we'll see how commuting patterns go, but be able to, for example, you can geo-target, very, kind of scary from a privacy standpoint, but if we can insert ads, for example, in streaming music or podcast, for people on the Tobin Bridge, in Boston at 6 or 6:30 at night saying, hey, if you lived and worked in New Hampshire, you could be paddling on the lake right now, or, skiing down the slopes. So again, being able to target people on our strengths and reaching out to people who we know through social media data are into these types of activities too. So going fishing and in a pond with lots of fish.
thanks.
Well, it's Dan. Have you seen any regions of the state do better than others in addressing this?
Yeah, I think the greater Manchester region, here in southern New Hampshire is doing better as a whole, just based on the number of jobs that are here. Specifically, the Seacoast is the hottest place we have going right now. The Upper Valley is doing pretty well. I mean, sometimes, we're victims of our own success though, because we don't have the housing that we need, both the volume of housing and the affordability of housing for folks to address, to be able to afford to live where they want to live. On the other hand, we have, Coas County is in the Monadnock region. You probably have a little bit more of a challenge. But you see some pockets, even in the North Country, like Littleton, for example, they're doing, phenomenally well, especially based on, a lot of their surrounding areas on providing, they're really doubling down on that kind of that small town independent feel that they have up there, and the opportunities for young people to get involved, there. So there are bright spots, certainly.
I have a couple questions. First, I wonder if there's been any studies on the next age group. Is there a turning point where we begin to have a positive migration versus negative? What is that age? The second question is relative to salaries and how equitable we are to other regions and other states. For instance, when I was working, Sanders' salaries did not compete with Raytheon salaries. And therefore, I always commuted to Massachusetts. I suspect nurses and teachers' salaries are lower in New Hampshire. So has there been any study to look at that side of the issue? Thank you.
So New Hampshire is not our statewide play, I should say, is, we don't have our own data on that, but I can speak to, your first question with regard to, what's the kind of the turning point where, young people are more inclined to come back. And, census data show that it's really like the, late 20s through late 30s, when young people start to consider settling down and having a family. We start to see that influx, because then at that point, I mean, like all of us, I suppose at that age, you're less concerned with what you're going to do on Friday and Saturday night, and more concerned about things like, school districts and, crime stats and, good places to raise family and property values. So we definitely see that, in that, net in migration data, it's definitely, being, fueled most by those primarily in their 30s. With regard to your second question on salaries, yes, that is most definitely, a key factor. That New Hampshire salaries in pretty much every industry are lower than one could find. Primarily, I mean, we're talking, especially here in Southern New Hampshire, in Massachusetts. Especially, I mean, you mentioned nursing in particular. I mean, in some cases, like I know people, I have friends who are, I have a friend who's an RN, she can drive down to Boston, pull like, 3 12-hour shifts at Brigham Women's, and make like 40% more than she could make at CMC or Elliott here in Manchester. So it's definitely an issue, and depending on the industry, those different wage differentials can be that much higher, and that's a reason why we have 118,000 people, I think, leaving the state every day to work, in Massachusetts in particular. So it's definitely an issue, and this is something that employers don't often like to hear, but and I recognize there are fiscal challenges and all that, but I mean, push comes to shove, a lot of employers just need to pay more. We can work on the other side of the equation, trying to make housing more affordable, as we should, and address the actual cost of college, here in New Hampshire, which we should, but we also need to address wages as well. And I think, employers are beginning to get it, because they just can't hire the people they need, and they can try everything else, and it's great to have all the different perks we hear about trying to attract folks, and things like student debt repayment benefits, and pet insurance is a big one that's coming up. Those things are all great and needed, but salary is still number one.
Thanks for your presentation. It's great.
Will, quick question for you. You brought up the census. I think, yeah, you can look at places like Rhode Island, New York, Pennsylvania. They're all about to lose a congressional district, and the Sun Belt's growing. But I feel like that kind of geography piece is a little misleading, because I look at states like Montana, Colorado, Oregon, they're all gaining a congressional district. And I don't think of any of those states as, urbanized states. They're largely rural. They're definitely cold climate. Are there things that they're doing out there that we could mimic kind of in New Hampshire?
I think so. And like, I mentioned Commissioner Taylor Caswell earlier, and, part of the, kind of the thing I think we can do to kind of piggyback on, really and share in our own unique New Hampshire way, what a lot of these states, particularly, northern tier states out west, is to be able to position ourselves as, not that we want to be something else, but I've heard some people say it like, let's make, Manchester in particular, the Boulder of the East. And, to really talk about that, you can have those types of experiences, here, in New Hampshire, on the East Coast, that you don't have to, move 2,000 miles away to have. And Colorado in particular, does an excellent job, really promoting that outdoor lifestyle. And I think parts of Idaho and Montana, Oregon, certainly do the same thing, being able to pitch a lifestyle. And again, is it a lifestyle that'll appeal to everybody? No. Are we going to appeal to everybody anyway? No. So I think that finding out what our strengths are and playing to those, work to address other things on the back end that will facilitate that. But I think there are definitely lessons to learn from some of these other states. Warmth, we're never going to be able to compete with Arizona in February, but we can certainly play up the aspects that we do have.
So, Will, to that end, my question is about Boston. So, on the one hand, it can be seen certainly as competition, 118,000 people, commuting in on a daily basis. On the other hand, it could arguably be positioned as probably the biggest asset is the proximity to Boston and all of that. I work in the medical device space, and there's virtually zero medical device activity. That's not entirely true, but it's pretty small in New Hampshire. And yet, when I talk with people routinely in my business, I talk about the fact that we're part of the second largest medical device cluster in the world, being 45 minutes from downtown Boston. So how do you think about sort of the charter of stay, work, play, sort of in that context? Is Boston an asset or is a threat in how you think about things? And I know there's certainly an answer that's both, but I think those are two fundamentally different ways to position the question of that big monolith just to our south.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and you bring up a great point. I think to answer your question shortly, and I'll expand. I think it's an asset. But however you feel about it, it's a reality. So love it or hate it, it's there, and we can either take advantage of it or spend all our time complaining about it. I'm of the opinion that it's an asset. And in fact, I was taking part in a webinar last week, a couple of weeks ago, that was really talking about remote ready cities, kind of taking advantage of the silver lining brought about by the pandemic of, people, probably temporarily leaving metropolitan populated areas, and decamping for places like New Hampshire. And it's really saying, the point they were making was that, second and third tier cities, really have an advantage here to the extent that we can promote the access that we have. And I think access is the key word. And that's why I think the Southern New Hampshire and the greater Manchester region in particular, are so very well positioned, because we do have that, we have access to Boston. People might not want to, and as they get older, naturally, kind of not want to live in it and, deal with, the traffic and, everything else that goes along with it, but they still want access, to the cultural amenities there, concerts, sporting events, just general fun. But, they can be back in Southern New Hampshire in an hour. Same thing, access to the mountains, access to the lakes, access. I mean, everybody says it, that's one of the key advantages that this region has is location. So, and, even from an employment standpoint, I mean, do I wish that, a few more of those workers that were driving down to Boston, were able to stay in New Hampshire and work here? Sure. But at the same time, they're going down there, they're earning those Massachusetts wages, and which primarily they're being spent, back here in New Hampshire. I used to run the Chamber of Commerce in Derry for a few years. And I remember, I live in Manchester, so I'd kind of make that reverse commute. I'd drive in the morning and everybody would be driving out of Derry. I'd be leaving in the evening and everybody would be driving back in. So I get that it's real, and, it makes it a challenge, certainly for kind of the other the other side of the coin is, from, getting folks to serve on conservation commissions and planning boards is tough, when you have a lot of your folks who are not getting home until 6:30 at night and they're exhausted and they just don't have time to serve, in the PTA or whatever. So it's a double-edged sword, but ultimately, having a world-class city with world-class, job opportunities, cultural institutions, educational institutions, medical place, hospitals, it's an asset.
Thank you.
Well,
All right,
thank you all for the time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Will.
That was great. Thanks so much, Will. Good to see you. Good to hear from you. It was great to get that update. I know I saw you speak on this survey a couple years ago, and now to get your strategies is really great. So awesome.
Sylvia, anything else before we adjourn?
No, but thanks, everyone. It's great to see you, and hope everyone has a good month.
Thanks, Will.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, Peter.
Auburn seconds.
Auburn, second, someone.
Thumbs up.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Who's